For 50 years, I was the woman behind the camera. I photographed this town's every wedding and funeral and county championship and christening, 1,000 of other people's happiest days. And if you go looking through all those thousands of pictures, you will not find me in a single one of them. I was always the one holding the camera, never once the one worth pointing it at. I'm going to tell you about the morning, at 70 years old, 3 weeks a widow, when I pointed my car west and finally, for the first time in my entire life, got into the frame. But first you have to understand what it does to a woman to spend her whole life documenting a joy she was never, not once, allowed to feel. My name is Marian. I am 70 years old, and for half a century, I was the only photographer in our small Kansas town, out where the land is flat and the sky is enormous, and everything, after a while, can start to look the same shade of dust. I knew light the way some people know music. I could walk into any room and read it, the way the window fell, the way a face would catch the gold of late afternoon, and I could make anyone look beautiful, anyone look radiant, anyone look gloriously, achingly alive. Anyone, that is, except the one woman I could never seem to photograph, which was myself, the gray woman in my own mirror, whom I had, somewhere along the way, simply let go dim. That is the cruel joke I carried for 50 years. I gave this whole town its memories of being happy and being loved, and I did it from behind a lens, in the dark, at the edge of every bright room, a ghost at 1,000 parties, recording a feast I was never invited to sit down and eat. For 50 years, I was this town's memory of itself. If you grew up here, I took the picture of you on your first day of school, and your wedding day, and your own children's first days. And someday, likely, the picture of you they will set by the guest book at your funeral. I have a whole life's work of other people's faces in their brightest and their saddest hours. Drawer after drawer of this town being born and married and mourned. And there is a real honor in that. I do not diminish it. But here is the thing nobody tells you about being the keeper of everyone's memories. You are never in them. I have several thousand photographs of joy, and I am the author of every one, and the subject of not a single one. I learned to find my satisfaction in that, the way you learn to find your dinner in the smell of someone else's kitchen. Because the camera, you see, is also a wall. As long as you are behind it, working, you have a perfect reason to be at the party, without ever once having to be at the party. It is the most respectable way in the whole world to hide from your own life. And I hid behind that lens for half a century, and I called it a career, and I called it being needed. And it was both of those things. And it was also a very long and very quiet way of not living. If you have ever spent your whole life on the outside of the glass, documenting everyone else's joy while quietly starving for a little of your own, then I think you already know the particular ache I am about to develop in the light. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from, and whether there is a version of yourself, a brighter one, that you put away a long time ago and told yourself you were too old or too sensible to ever take back out. I read every single one. There are so many of us, it turns out, standing just outside the frame of our own lives. Let me tell you about Howard, my husband, because he is the one who taught me to stand in the dark. Howard was not a cruel man, not in any way you could photograph. He was a respected man, an insurance man, a deacon, a man who valued above all things on this earth how things appeared. And the way things appeared to Howard required a certain kind of wife, a quiet one, a proper one, a sensible woman in sensible colors who did not draw attention, did not laugh too loud, did not have notions. When I married him at 20, I was not gray. I want you to know that. At 20, I was a girl who wore a red coat and laughed from the belly and had one enormous, specific, shimmering dream, which was to take my camera and drive all the way to the Pacific Ocean, alone, photographing the whole wide country as I went, every mountain and diner and stranger's face between Kansas and the sea. I told Howard about that dream once, early on, with my whole shining heart, and he laughed, not cruelly. That was the thing. Just a small, fond, dismissive laugh. The same laugh he would use on me for 50 years. And he said, "That is a child's idea. Marian, a married woman does not go gallivanting off alone. What would people think? What would people think?" That laugh and that question were the two tools Howard used to slowly, gently, lovingly file me down into a woman who matched the furniture. And the red coat went to the church donation bin, and the dream went into a drawer, and the shimmering girl went quiet. And I picked up my camera, and I started the long 50-year work of photographing everyone else's life instead of living my own. I told you about the red coat, but I want you to understand how the filing down actually works, because it is so gentle that you cannot feel it happening to you. Howard never once forbade me a thing outright. That was not his way. His way was the fond little laugh and the raised eyebrow and the quiet word in the car on the way home. "Marian, that dress is a bit much for a woman your age. Marian, you were laughing rather loudly tonight. Marian, the Hendersons mentioned you'd been off photographing the old barns again, and I just wondered if that was quite the thing." Each one so small, each one delivered with such apparent care, and you adjust, just a little, each time, to keep the peace, to avoid the eyebrow. And so the dress goes back to the shop, and the laugh gets quieter, and the barns go unphotographed, and you never notice that you are being sanded down one grain at a time, because no single grain hurts, until one day you look in the mirror and there is no rough edge left anywhere on you. Nothing that catches the light, nothing that is particularly you, just a smooth gray woman who matches the furniture and never, ever embarrasses anybody. That is how the careful ones do it, not with a cage, with 1,000 tiny corrections, every single one of them offered to you as love. I do not want to make Howard a monster, because he was not one, and the truth is more useful than a monster. Howard genuinely believed he was right. He believed that a sensible, contained, gray sort of life was the responsible kind, the respectable kind, and that my dreams of color and motion and the open road were childish things I needed protecting from, for my own good and the family's good name. He thought he was being a good husband by clipping my wings, because in his world, a clipped bird is a safe bird, and a safe bird does not embarrass anyone. He pressed me flat the way you press a flower in a heavy book, and he honestly thought he was preserving me. By the time I was 60, I had been pressed flat for so long, I had forgotten I was ever any other shape. I was Howard's wife, the photographer, the quiet, gray woman at the edge of the room, and I believed, all the way down, that this was simply who I was, and not who I had been carefully, patiently turned into. And the most insidious part, the part I am still angry about, is that I came to believe it was me. That is the real theft, not the red coat, not even the dream of the ocean. The theft was that after enough years of being told, so kindly, that the bright, reckless girl was childish and embarrassing and not quite the thing, I stopped defending her. And then I stopped remembering her. And then I genuinely believed that I was, by my very nature, a quiet, gray, cautious woman who had never wanted anything wild in her whole life. Howard did not just put my dream in a drawer. He convinced me I had never had it. He rewrote me, gently, over 50 years, until even I believed the edited version. And the saddest thing I can tell you is that by the end, I would have defended the gray woman to you myself. I would have told you, sincerely, "Oh, That is just how I am. I was never the adventurous type. That was never me. That is what a lifetime of small corrections does to a person. It does not only cage the bird, it convinces the bird it was never able to fly in the first place. And then, 3 years ago, Howard's heart stopped at his desk, and I became a widow. And I discovered something that shamed me and then, slowly, set me free. I grieved him, truly. 50 years is 50 years. But underneath the grief, in a place I was at first too ashamed to even look at, there was something else, something that scared me half to death because I had no name for it anymore. It was air. It was space. It was the terrifying, dizzying silence of a house where, for the first time in 50 years, there was no one to ask, what would people think? I would catch myself, in those first weeks, doing small, forbidden things, playing the radio loud, leaving a mess, laughing out loud alone. And each time a part of me braced for Howard's fond little laugh, and it did not come, and would never come again. And in that not coming was the whole rest of my life, handed back to me at 70, in a house gone suddenly, frighteningly quiet. I want to be honest about the shame of it, because I think it matters to someone out there. For the first weeks of my widowhood, every time that little bubble of air, that lightness rose up in me, I was horrified at myself. What kind of woman feels relief when her husband of 50 years is barely cold in the ground? I thought it meant something was wrong with me, that I was unnatural, hard. It took me a long time to understand that I was not glad Howard was dead. I grieved Howard, truly. What I was feeling underneath the grief was something entirely separate, and it was not about him at all. It was the simple animal relief of a creature that has been holding its breath for 50 years and is suddenly, against all expectation, allowed to exhale. You can mourn a person with your whole heart and still be relieved to finally breathe, and there is no contradiction in it, and there is no shame in it. Though it took me half a year of widowhood to stop flinching each time the relief rose up. The body knows it has been pressed flat long before the mind will let itself admit who was doing the pressing. For a while I did nothing with it. I sat in the gray, because gray was what I knew, and because my grown children expected me to, and there is a powerful gravity to other people's expectations of who you are. But one afternoon, cleaning out a closet, I found it, the drawer, and in the drawer, under 50 years of sensible things, was a faded photograph I had taken of myself at 20, in the red coat, laughing, with the whole shimmering road still ahead of me. And I sat down on the closet floor and I looked at that girl, that bright, reckless girl I had been before Howard pressed me flat. And I did the math no widow is supposed to do. I thought, she wanted to drive to the ocean. She never got to. And I am the only one left who can take her. I am 70 years old. I have, if I am lucky, a handful of good years left in this body. And I have spent 50 of them asking, what would people think? I am done asking. I am going to take that girl to the sea. I do not really believe in signs. I am far too practical a woman for that. But I will tell you that finding that photograph felt like the girl in the red coat reaching up through 50 years of sensible sweaters and grabbing me by the wrist. I had not seen her face in decades, and what undid me, sitting there on the closet floor, was not nostalgia, it was recognition. I looked at that 20-year-old with her camera and her shining, ridiculous, enormous dream, and I did not think, oh, how young I was. I thought, oh, there you are. I have missed you. I have been looking for you for 50 years, and you were folded up in a drawer the whole time. And then a second thought came, harder and clearer than anything I had let myself think in decades. She trusted me. That bright girl, when she packed herself away to keep Howard comfortable, she did it believing that someday, somehow, She would get her turn, her road, her ocean. And I was the only person left alive who could keep that promise to her. I was 70 years old, and I owed a 20-year-old girl a trip to the sea, and I had very nearly run all the way out of time to pay her back. So I did the most sensible seeming, and to my children, the most insane thing I have ever done. I bought a reliable little car, I packed one bag and my best camera, I left a note, and at 70 years old, 3 weeks after I buried the man who spent 50 years telling me a married woman does not go gallivanting off alone, I pointed the car west, toward the Pacific, alone. And I drove out of that flat gray town and into the largest, most colorful, most alive 3 months of my entire life. I cannot fully describe to you what happened to me on that road, except to say that I came back to life, organ by organ, mile by mile. I had spent 50 years making other people look alive through a lens, and now, for the first time, the aliveness was happening to me. I photographed everything. I photographed the sun coming up over the Sangre de Cristo so red it hurt. I photographed a waitress in New Mexico with a laugh like a bell, and a young couple in love at a gas station, and my own bare feet in the cold Pacific at the end, which I reached on a Tuesday and wept at like a child. But mostly, and this is the thing, for the first time in 50 years, I started turning the camera around. A self-portrait at a roadside diner, grinning, sunburned. Me in a borrowed cowboy hat in Colorado. Me, gray hair wild in the wind off a canyon, laughing the belly laugh I thought Howard had filed away forever. I was getting into the frame. After 50 years on the dark side of the glass, I was finally letting the light fall on me. The first day, I cried for 200 miles. Not from sadness, but from a feeling I no longer even had a word for. Until somewhere in the second day, I realized the word was wonder. I had forgotten wonder entirely. Howard's world had no wonder in it. Wonder was not sensible. Wonder was a child's idea. And out there on the open road, it came flooding back into a 70-year-old body all at once, almost too much to bear. I stood in a field of wildflowers at dawn and shook. I talked to truckers at diners and old men at gas pumps and a girl hitchhiking with a guitar. Real conversations, the easy kind that Howard's eyebrow had made impossible for half a century. And I photographed all of them, and some of them photographed me right back on my own camera, laughing. And then I did a thing I had never once done in 50 years behind the lens. I started handing the camera to strangers and saying, "Would you take one of me? Would you take one of me?" 5 words I had never said in my whole working life. And every stranger said, "Yes, of course, gladly," the way you do for a happy old woman on an adventure. And one by one, those pictures came back to me. And in every single one of them was a woman I had not laid eyes on since I was 20. Gray now, and lined now, but lit up from somewhere deep inside, like a dark window with the lamp finally switched on. And my son Paul could not stand it. I have to tell you about Paul, and I have to be fair, because Paul is not a villain. Paul is his father's son, and that is its own kind of tragedy. Paul grew up watching Howard, and Paul learned, the way children do, that love means control, and that a woman is meant to be contained, and that the worst thing in the world is for people to talk. So when his mother, 3 weeks widowed, suddenly took off alone across the country and started sending home photographs of herself laughing in cowboy hats, Paul did not see a woman coming back to life. He saw a crisis. He saw his mother losing her mind. He called me at every motel, his voice tight with his father's exact disapproval. And the things he said got worse as the weeks went on. First it was, "Mom, this isn't appropriate. You're in mourning. What will people think?" Then it was, "You're embarrassing the family. "Mom, the whole town is talking." And then, finally, the thing that told me Paul had truly become his father, the thing that nearly broke my heart. He said, "We are worried about you, Mom. This isn't like you. We think you might not be thinking clearly. We think you should come home and see a doctor." And I understood, in that motel room, what was happening. My son was preparing to decide that my joy was a symptom, that a 70-year-old woman could not possibly be happy and sane at the same time, that the only sane version of his mother was the gray one, and that this colorful, laughing creature on the open road must be evidence that something had finally gone wrong in her head. He was not entirely wrong that something had changed in my head. Something had. I had started thinking my own thoughts for the first time in 50 years. And to a family that had only ever known me as a quiet gray woman, my own thoughts looked exactly like madness. I have tried hard to understand Paul, and I think the truth is that my coming alive did not merely embarrass him, it frightened him down at the root, because it called everything into question. If his gray, careful mother had been a whole other woman all along, a woman pressed flat for 50 years, then what was his father? Not the good provider of the family story, but the man who did the pressing. And what was the family Paul grew up inside, the one he had quietly modeled his own marriage on? Paul could not afford for me to be happy, because my happiness was an indictment of the entire world he had built his life upon. It was easier, so much easier, to decide that I was unwell. A sick mother he could pity and manage and gently fold back into the familiar story. But a well mother, a free one, a happy one, blew the whole story to pieces and asked him to look hard at things about his father and about himself that he was nowhere near ready to see. So he reached, the way frightened people always reach, for the one explanation that let everything stay exactly where it was. She has lost it. Because she has lost it is so much less frightening than she has finally found it, since that second one turns and asks something of you. There was a night in a little motel in Arizona where I nearly turned the car around, because Paul had called, and this time he had used a new word, a frightening one. He had said the family had spoken to someone about whether I was competent to be making these decisions and handling my own affairs. And the word competent landed in me like a stone. Because that is the ultimate weapon, isn't it? The one they hold over an older woman who dares to want her own life. Not, you may not, but you are not in your right mind. You cannot trust yourself. We know better than you do what is good for you. And for one long night in that motel, I felt the old gravity pull at me. 50 years of, what would people think? And a sensible woman doesn't, and we know better. And I sat on the edge of that strange bed, and I very nearly decided that they were right. That a woman my age chasing a girlhood dream really was a kind of foolishness, maybe even a kind of sickness. And then I should go home and be gray and safe and let them take care of me. That word, competent, I want to sit with it for a moment, because it is the specific weapon they use on us, on older women most of all, and you should know its shape so you can see it coming for you. They do not say you are not allowed to be happy, because they cannot. It would sound monstrous out loud. So instead they say, we are worried about you. They dress the cage up as concern. They take your perfectly sane longing for a life of your own, and they quietly relabel it as a symptom, a decline, a sign you can no longer be trusted with yourself. And the genius of it, the trap of it, is that the kinder and more worried they sound, the more cornered you are. Because now if you fight back, you are not merely disobedient, you are proving their very point. See how agitated she gets? See how she is not herself anymore? It is a perfect and airless trap. And for one long night in Arizona, it very nearly closed on me for good. Because there is nothing on this earth more frightening to a woman who has just found her freedom than the suggestion, in a loving voice, that her freedom is the first symptom of her losing her mind. And then I looked at my camera and at the photographs spread across that motel bed, 3 months of them. And I made myself do the thing 50 years of marriage had trained me never to do. I looked, clearly, at the actual evidence. And the evidence was not a confused woman. The evidence was the sharpest, most present, most awake work I had done in my entire life. You cannot fake the photographs I was taking. You cannot, with a clouded mind, catch the exact half second a stranger's face breaks into joy. My eye had never been clearer. My hand had never been steadier. I was not losing my mind out there on that road. I was finding it after 50 years of having misplaced it in a man's idea of a proper wife. And I realized, sitting on that bed, that they had it exactly backwards. The gray, silent, pressed flat woman they were so comfortable with, the one they called sane, that woman had been the sick one. This one, the one laughing in the wind, was me, finally well. And I was not about to let them pathologize the first wellness I had felt in half a century. I have thought a great deal since about how close I came to handing them the very verdict they wanted. Because that is the cruelest part of the competent trap. It makes you do their work for them. They plant the doubt, and then your own exhausted mind waters it. And before long, you are the one lying awake wondering whether a happy old woman on a road trip really might be a kind of breakdown, whether maybe they are right, whether maybe you should just be sensible and go home. And the only thing that saved me that night was that I had spread out on that bed 50 years of trained craft that simply does not lie. I knew, professionally, in my very bones, what the work of a clear eye looks like and what the work of a clouded one looks like. And those photographs were the clearest, truest work of my entire life. The proof of my own sanity was right there in my hands, written in the one language I happen to be completely fluent in. And I want to say this to anyone caught in that same trap who does not have a stack of photographs. Look for your own evidence, whatever it is for you. The thing you have been doing well, the thing that has gotten sharper and not duller since the day you came back to life. Your joy is not the symptom. Your joy is the evidence. Trust the steady work of your own clear hands over the worry in their voices, every single time. So when Paul flew out, because he did, he flew all the way to Arizona to bring his mother home, certain he was staging a rescue, I was ready for him. He found me at a little diner off the highway, and he sat down across from me with his father's exact, worried, controlling face, ready to manage me. And he started in. "Mom, you're not well. We're all so worried. It's time to be sensible and come home." And I let him finish, and then I slid a stack of the photographs across the table to him. And I said, "Paul, I want you to look at these, and then I want you to tell me, honestly, if these look like the work of a woman who has lost her mind, or if they look like the work of a woman who has finally found it. Look at the light in them. A confused woman cannot see light like that. And I will tell you something else, son, while you look. I have been to a doctor on this trip, a fine one in Santa Fe, who gave me a clean bill of health and then told me I seemed like one of the most alive 70-year-olds he had ever met. So this is not about my mind. This is about the fact that you, like your father, cannot tell the difference between a woman who is unwell and a woman who is simply, finally, no longer doing what she is told. And I am not coming home to be gray so that the rest of you can be comfortable. I have a few good years left, and I am going to spend them in color." Paul did not say anything for a long time. He just looked at the photographs. And here is the thing I had not planned, the thing that broke the whole story open. Near the bottom of the stack was a photograph I had taken without quite meaning to, a self-portrait in a motel mirror late one night. And in it, I was not laughing. In it, I was just sitting on the edge of the bed, an old woman, alone. And on my face was an expression Paul had never once seen there in his whole life. It was peace, plain, unguarded peace. And my son, his father's son, looked at that picture of his mother at rest in her own skin for the first time in 50 years, and something in his rigid face cracked, and he said, very quietly, "I have never seen you look like that." And I said, "No, Paul, you haven't, because your father needed me gray, and I let him. And you grew up thinking the gray woman was your mother. She wasn't. She was just what was left of me after 50 years of being careful. This is your mother. You're meeting her for the first time, and she's 70. And I'm so sorry it took me this long, but I am so glad you get to meet her before I'm gone." And my son, the insurance man, the deacon's boy, put his head down on a diner table in Arizona and cried. Not because his mother had lost her mind, but because he had just understood, all at once, what it had cost his mother to keep her family comfortable, and what he had almost done to her in the name of love, which was the very same thing his father did, press her flat and call it care. We sat in that diner a long while after he stopped crying, my son and I, and we said things to each other we had never once said. True things, the kind that 50 years of keeping the peace had made impossible in our family. He told me he had always sensed, even as a small boy, that there was a different mother somewhere in there, a warmer one, a brighter one, and that he had grieved her without ever knowing her name, and that watching his father quietly shrink me had taught him, God help him, that this was simply what a marriage was, and that he had been doing some of the very same thing to his own good wife without ever once meaning to. And right there, over cold coffee in Arizona, my son decided to try to be a different kind of man than the one he had been raised to be. And I want you to notice that a photograph did that. Not my speech, not my anger, a single picture of his mother at peace in a motel mirror, a thing he had never seen in his life and could not argue with. Because the camera does not lie. And the peace on my face was real, and it asked him the one question that 50 years of family silence had buried. What did it cost her to give us all that quiet? He finally let himself feel the answer. He did not bring me home. He drove the next leg with me instead, to the Grand Canyon, and he took a photograph of his mother standing at the edge of it, with her arms thrown wide and her gray hair loose and wild, in a red coat I had bought myself in Flagstaff. A 70-year-old woman, finally, fully, gloriously in the frame. It is the only good photograph my son has ever taken. I keep it on my wall. It is the first picture of me, the real me, that has existed in 50 years. And my boy took it, which means he finally saw me, which is all, in the end, that any of us are really asking for. I made it to the Pacific, in the end, with my son flown home a changed man, and my own self changed past recognizing. I stood in the cold surf at 70 years old, and I let it soak the hem of the red coat I had bought myself in Flagstaff. And I set my camera on a rock and started the timer. And I ran back into the frame, both arms thrown wide, and the shutter caught a 70-year-old woman standing alone at the edge of the continent her whole life had told her she would never reach, finally keeping a promise to a girl folded up in a drawer. That photograph hangs over my bed now, beside the one Paul took at the canyon. They are the only two pictures in 50 years of work that I did not take of someone else's joy. I took them of my own. And every single morning I wake up beneath them, and I think about how terribly close I came to dying gray 3 short weeks from that ocean, having spent my entire life exactly 1 drawer away from the woman I actually was the whole time. I am a photographer, so let me leave you with the truest thing the lens ever taught me. There is all the difference in the world between documenting a life and living one. I spent 50 years on the safe side of the glass, capturing other people's joy in perfect focus, and telling myself that being near the joy was the same as having it. It is not. You can spend your whole life as the one behind the camera, the reliable one, the one at the edge of the room, the one things happen near but never to. And you can call that being sensible, or being a good wife, or knowing your place. But what it really is standing outside the frame of your own life and watching it happen without you. If someone, even someone who loves you, even your own family, has you convinced that your joy is foolish or unseemly or a symptom, or that a woman your age has no business reaching for the bright thing she put away at 20, I am 70 years old, and I am here to tell you the truest thing I know. It is not too late to get in the frame. The light is still falling. The road is still out there. And the girl in the red coat, the one you packed away to keep everyone else comfortable, she has been waiting in that drawer this whole time. And she is not asking for the years back. She is only asking for the ones you have left. So pick up the camera, turn it around, and for once in your life, beloved, step into the light and let it fall on you. You were always worth pointing it at. You just had to be the one, finally, to believe it.